Okay, so we're talking about somatoform and dissociative disorders. So we did somatoform disorders in the last video. We talked about somatization disorder, where we have some feature that's really we're overly conscious about to the point where we isolate ourselves socially, and then we begin to develop this extreme, the conditions worsen, and we develop extreme sympathy toward ourselves about that. And then we have conversion disorder, where we actually have something major wrong with our body, but there's no biological reason. We use examples of paralysis, or not being able to move arm or leg, or maybe even having some stroke characteristics or something like that. So now we're going to talk about, and it's an interesting one. You hear that word, out of body experiences. Well, that's psychologically, this would be really. All of these disorders would be awful to have. I mean, they would be absolutely awful to have. But dissociative disorder, okay, dissociative, D-I-S-S-O-C-I-A-T-I-V-E, dissociative disorder. Okay, now, dissociative disorder is characterized by detachment from self, okay? Detachment from self. In other words, we literally can detach ourselves from ourselves, okay? You know, the whole out-of-body experience. Well, we'll talk about what all that means in a little bit. And it's also a detachment. That's a detachment from object reality. So we just simply, there's certain things that we just are a reality that we don't deal with. So let's get with that. So dissociative disorder, let's describe that as detachment from self. Okay, detachment from self. All right. So we got a couple here. We got a couple here to deal with. Okay. So we have the dissociative identity disorder, and it's abbreviated DID, but you need to know the name of it. Dissociative, D-I-S-S-O-C-I-A-T-I-V-E. Okay, D-I-S-S-O-C-I-A-T-I-V-E, dissociative identity disorder. A person, in this disorder, a person adopts not one but many new identities, okay, or alters that coexist in one body and mind. The alters may be complete and distinct personality, or fragments, or only partially independent. So, dissociative identity, now we talk about schizophrenia and different types of personalities. This could lead over into a dissociative disorder. So let's just go ahead and define this a little bit. Dissociative identity disorder is where a person has new identities, okay, has new identities beyond themselves, okay, can be one, can be several. When we get to dissociative disorders, we're usually dealing, we don't want to say that it's always caused by this, but what happens is a person generally has experienced something so bad, or there's some reason why they can't deal with life as is. Okay, here's some of the characteristics of dissociative identity disorder. All right. The host, the identity that seeks the treatment, okay, the person themselves is very seldom ever in the identity. Wow. So the identity is always somebody different than yourself. So let's just say we have somebody with dissociative identity disorder, okay. Who they are is not ever really the personality. So it's just a totally dissociation with themselves. It's not like we have this personality and then we have another one and another one. No, we just totally do away with this personality, which tells us that there's something that the mind says, I can't deal in this realm. Okay, so the characteristics are: the identity does not involve the person's original identity. It's often, okay. It's often, it's kind of interesting because there's a couple different things here. It can often be cross-gendered, okay, so that's kind of interesting too. Another thing that it says is one personality is always stronger than the other, okay. And so, and then it says it may be distinct in the level of handiness. Well, let me reword that. Okay, let me give you the three characteristics of dissociative disorder and kind of reword those. Number one, the host or the person is very seldom in the identity. Okay, the second characteristic of dissociative disorders is that there's one dominant character and one weaker character. All right, so there could be a series of dominant and a series of weaker. It could be several characters within the identity. So the other thing is that you have kind of a pecking order. Okay, you have a pecking order. You understand what pecking order means? That's the old chicken thing where the strongest baby chick would peck at the one behind it till pretty soon the one that's the weakest would be at the back and it wouldn't have any feathers left. Okay, but there's no one. Whenever it would go to peck at the one in the front of it, it would get in a battle till pretty soon whoever won got to move up, and so the weakest one was in the back. Now we think that sounds pretty bad, and sometimes people get pecking orders, which isn't good. But in chickens, the reason they had pecking orders is, I mean, it's not like they said multiple choice, here's why we're going to do that. But the reason why that worked for natural selection is the weakest ones, if there wasn't enough food or there were more predators than there were chicken, the youngest ones didn't survive. So in order for natural selection to happen and for that breed of chicken to be as strong as it can to survive, the stronger ones survive, the weaker ones die. So what happens in this one is you have a stronger personality and you have a weaker personality. So here's well, let me I kind of jumped over this. Let's make sure we got the characteristics. Three main characteristics of dissociative disorder. The host identity is never recognized. It's not visible. Okay. There's a stronger identity and a weaker identity. Okay. Stronger identity and a weaker identity. All right. And then the personality of them are usually opposite. Okay. So we have stronger and weaker and opposite personalities. You don't need to put that often across genders. That just goes to show you a lot of times where there might be a stronger or weaker. Okay, so I mean, don't read more into that than there is there. That's what the book is trying to say. So why do you suppose somebody with dissociative disorder would have a stronger personality and a weaker personality? Well, the book talks about a lot that they could have been a victim or had something really bad happen to them. So they recognize that low pecking order. Okay, so that's part of their personality. But on the same token, they've got to be the strong person to overcome that. Okay, so that's a dissociative disorder. All right. Now, let's go on to another one here. Okay, so the other one here is a depersonalization disorder. depersonalization, depersonalization disorder. Now, in this, it's very real, okay, but this is literally where let me read it right here. It says, kind of got a little glare there. It says, very rare feelings of detachment and are severe, frightening, and dominant to the person's life, often causing panic disorder because the person literally lives outside of their body. Okay, wow. So we've got we've got two different types of depersonalization. We have dissociative amnesia. In dissociative amnesia, it's just like regular amnesia where the person doesn't remember anything. Dissociative amnesia is where the person themselves actually forgets who they are, forgets all the things around them, has no memory, and they imagine themselves living outside their body and not knowing anything that there is. And then the other type of depersonalization disorder is dissociative fugue, F-U-G-U-E, and that's memory loss accompanied. This is let me put it in. There's so many psychological definitions. Let's just put this in our own words. Dissociative fugue is where the person has memory loss and literally goes on a journey outside of their body. So They may actually, there's maybe one of two things. It may be like a dream where they're doing this, okay? Or it may be where they get up and they literally walk around and they literally go about life as if they're on a journey outside of their body, okay? So let's come back here and let's talk about those again. Just so, first of all, let's make sure you kind of got the right idea for your notes, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it a little bit. So we have dissociative disorders, okay? So we have the dissociative identity disorder, all right? And then we also have the depersonalization disorder. So once again, just to kind of talk about those a little bit, dissociative disorders, the dissociative identity disorder is where they have multiple personalities that can exist at any time, okay? And then the depersonalization disorder is where they actually go out of the body, whether they separate themselves, whether it's just they just go off and they're in their mind they're existing as another body, or they feel like they go on a short-term journey. So what are the problems and what are the treatments? Well, the problems are pretty severe, and you know, all of your case studies, you've been figuring out the trigger. So this is a real problem, is what triggered this. We got to go back to where the triggers are. But when we're dealing with people with somatoform and dissociative disorders, it's hard to find the trigger because the trigger looks to be obviously to be the thing that they're concerned with. Okay, like in a somatoform, whatever it is that they're overly conscious. But that's not the trigger. We got to go back and see what it is. Same thing with the dissociative disorders. We got to go back and see what the trigger was. What caused this person to need to what? Not have the identity that they're having. So, well, it seems kind of confusing and stuff, but it's actually pretty simple. The test won't be too hard, but you need to go back and watch this video. And I have a general idea of some of the questions we'll ask, but just go back and watch and know that information. That's not a lot of information. But I wanted to stop here for a second, and I wanted to just tell you I've really enjoyed having you in the class, and I hope you've learned a lot. It's an entirely different class. We had Psychology 101, and if you haven't taken that, you might want to go back and take that. We offer that in the same hybrid style. But Psychology 101 dealt with a lot of things. But I want to talk about, as we conclude abnormal psychology, this dealt with things that became a much higher disorder. So we can understand people that have these disorders, whether it's personality disorders, anxiety, cognitive, somatotive, all the different disorders that we have, eating disorders. We understand that. We look at the trigger. And you've done a million case studies, and you're going to be glad to be done with all those. But why all the case studies? So you can look at trigger and cause, trigger and cause, trigger and cause. And then as we wrap this thing up, we realize that we have little bits and pieces of these within us that we're dealing with. So hopefully it will help you when you have little areas. It doesn't mean that you have an abnormal disability, but it does allow you to kind of look into the triggers and be able to help you to encourage yourself when you have issues, or somebody else. And there's a trigger that's causing you to be somebody that, you know, maybe it's inhibiting your life in some way. So, you know, that's pretty good. But really have enjoyed having you. Really have enjoyed working with you. We have a third psychology class. If you're still on board, we have Life and Growth Development, Psychology 104. We teach that. Wow, if you take all three, you'll have 9 hours. Almost getting towards a minor there in psychology, so that's pretty awesome. Life and Growth Development is required for most of the nursing, radiology, pre-med, and a lot of the counseling things. So if I don't see you in Psychology 104, it's been great having you, and I just appreciate you taking the classes. Thanks again.